It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. So today's guest is actually going to be my partner, Chris, who you probably see her as Been There, Got Out too. And the topic is going to be the same. So we had arranged to talk about the effects on children of staying in a relationship where domestic abuse is present. I'm not just talking about physical violence, talking about psychological abuse, verbal abuse, financial, blah, blah, blah. You already know a lot of that stuff. So a couple of years ago, Chris and I put together a seminar or a webinar called The Top 7 Dangers of Toxic Relationships. And Chris, I'm inviting you on now. And so we figured, we already have Chris's take today, but we talked to his office staff and we're going to reschedule, but we still want to talk about this topic because it's so important. So let's see. Hey, there you go. I'm not with you today.
This is different.
I know. Look at you, Chris, with your reading glasses on.
That's right. Otherwise, I'm lost. So
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about those top 7 dangers of staying in a toxic relationship, but specifically how it affects the kids. And I think you and I will probably sprinkle in a little of our own personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the people we deal with are already in the legal system. They're already on their way out. But we also talk with a lot of people who, they're struggling to realize whether am I in an abusive relationship or not, because maybe it's not physical violence, or even if it is, right? But one of the reasons that people stay in those relationships, we hear this all the time, is I'm going to stay until the kids are grown, or I'm staying for the kids. I'm going to keep the family intact and all that stuff. And I used to, yeah, me too. I felt the exact same way. I felt like it's best for, for kids. And obviously, if a relationship is healthy between a mom and a dad, or 2 moms or 2 dads for that matter, that is best if it's intact, right? But if there's abuse present, it's really bad for the kids. And that was not intuitive as I learned like years ago at this point, I heard you doing the intro talking about the top 7 dangers workshop that we put together. And then of course we moved that into other presentations we've done over the years. It really is bad. It's harmful for the kids when those things are happening and when they're subject to it. It's better when the parents are apart. And there's a quote.
Right. Pause, Chris. Pause for a second, because I want to note that staying for the sake of the kids is often a very powerful manipulation to keep someone in the relationship. I know in my own situation, I was with my ex for 20 years. We were married for 18 years. And the big thing he used to keep me there, especially at the end when I was so ready to go, was if you leave this marriage, if you divorce me, we won't have an intact family and it's going to be your fault. And so I was terrified because I thought, I'm going to be the one breaking up the family. The kids are going to blame me for this and their lives are going to be destroyed because of our family not staying together. And I also thought it would be so confusing for them because my ex and I did not have like loud screaming fights. We rarely fought. And so I thought they just would be like, what are you doing to us? Why is it happening? So that's a big reason why I stayed longer than everybody says I stayed longer than I should, right?
Yeah, I think that's true of most people. But and in my case, my ex actually left me, which, in hindsight is probably the kindest thing she ever did for me. Because, I talk a lot about this, where I'm a very resilient person. I went through a lot of stuff when I was a kid, nothing like off the rails or anything, but, I developed this sense of like, I can endure anything. I can be stoic and get through anything. And I don't think I ever would have found the strength for me. So she left me and in hindsight, like, thank goodness, because I might still be in it if it weren't for that. So
thanks for you and thanks for me and everybody else that's benefiting from our experience of what it's like to get out of one of these relationships, both from that male and female perspective.
Yeah, exactly right. And to start us off, I came across, I was going through our presentation to grab the information for this presentation or whatever. And there's a quote. It was in USA Today. I don't know, it doesn't have an author, but it's a great quote. And it says, merely witnessing abuse carries the same risk of harm to children's mental health and learning as being abused directly.
Right. Yeah. People don't understand that. They think, well, I'm going to hide it from the kids because they only think physical. Physical is the one that counts, and the kids don't realize what's going on, but they do realize what's going on.
And even with physical, I mean, we talk to people all the time who say, well, you know, he only strangled me a couple of times, or, you know, stuff like that. It's like, whoa, that, you know, that's serious. You know, so recognizing it is really a big, important first step, and a lot of people struggle with that.
Right. And I know one thing, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead, I probably am, but is that when we stay in these relationships too, we often assume, well, I could be the buffer. Like, I'm not here. And this is true to some extent. And we know with loads of our clients, like when they're on their own with the kids, then I can't protect them.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. That's on our list. But you want to talk a little bit about some of the real impacts besides that can happen to kids in these situations, right? When they're so it can actually affect kids' brain development. It can cause body inflammation, even in very young kids.
Right. And isn't it, I remember something about like before a baby is born, like a fetus can even sense what's going on when there's lots of screaming and yelling, plus the physical stuff.
Yeah, and plus the stress. I mean, we all know that, you know, our bodies and minds, it's all one big thing that ties together, and the stress manifests itself in different ways. I mean, I remember an old work relationship that was very high conflict for me, and for a while, my jaw wouldn't line up correctly because I was under so much stress that it was affecting the way my jaw fit together. So it's all connected.
Right. Yeah. And you know, you're reminding me that at the tail end of my marriage, because I knew it was over in 2013, but it took me 2 years to sort of plan my exit and get out or get him out physically. But during that time, I kept getting injured. So I did martial arts, I did taekwondo, and it was like I wouldn't even get hit hard, and suddenly my back was out for days. Like it was hard to sit down, it was hard to get in the car. Then remember, Chris, when I had met you, I had jarred my facets, like all this stuff with neck and back. And I didn't even think at the time that so much had to do probably with the stress, because it wasn't that, well, maybe a little bit was physically wrong, but so much of it was the stress in my head and how it just, I think, psychosomatically affected my body.
Right, and you and I have both had trouble, like, with sleeping at different times. When you met, I was waking up just every morning, like you do now, but you do it in a healthy way. That's like, I'm at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, just like what's going on? Because I was right in the thick of it. At the time we met, I was only separated like 9 months or so. But so kids also, they can suffer a greater risk of depression. They get emotional scars, and this was a big one for me. Not kids, well, it affects kids too, but PTSD. We always talk about it being complex PTSD, whereas PTSD is like, if there's a single event, like you witness a mass shooting, or you're a soldier, something blows up and kills your comrade. Complex PTSD is called that because it's a series of events, like that by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's not just one event. It's trauma after trauma after trauma, and it wears down the sheath covering your amygdala, which is what controls your fight. The lizard brain we talk about, right? The fight or flight reflex, and it gets physically hard. Now it can recover, but it takes time. But kids suffer the same thing, PTSD. And then
right. Well, actually, I won't jump ahead because I know it's on your list. I'll wait. But let's also talk about, I'm sure we will, how depression in kids can manifest.
Okay. All right. So what you need to do is get one of those little bells, like in a hotel desk. And when I say the one that you're waiting for, it's that ding, 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 ding. Okay. All right. But so just to continue to go down the list, and I'll get to also some statistics, right? So this is sort of general stuff. But we also have a lot of statistics, and some of them are pretty scary. So kids' social skills are affected by these situations. They have more missed school, lower grades, a greater chance of dropping out, a greater chance of obesity.
That's
the one? Is that bell?
Yeah, that's my bell. We know, I know many kids that gain a lot of weight especially at the tween age where they just put on weight. And it's like, it seems to happen around the time there's a lot of problems in the house. I wouldn't say overt fighting, but when the kids sense that something's wrong, we've seen that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say more, but we've seen it directly.
Right. And then also a greater risk of anxiety disorders and mental illness. So that's touching on the depression, but it's not just depression, it's all kinds of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And one of our pediatrician who happens to be here was saying it's also common to have sensitivity to loud sound. Yeah. I'm thinking even like cars backfiring in the street where kids are terrified. I know adults get terrified of that too.
Touch too also, right? Like some kids, we have clients whose kids are like very sensitive to being touched in certain places and they have a reaction to that.
Yeah.
So it's all anxiety.
Yeah, she's saying jumpy, very jumpy too. And adults, same thing.
Yep. All right, so want to get into some actual numbers, statistics. All right, so children in homes where abuse occurs, well, they're more likely to be violent or delinquent themselves, and they're 50% more likely to abuse alcohol or drugs. Right?
Yeah.
They're 24% more likely to commit sexual assault.
Themselves.
Yes.
Right.
So you kind of go both ways, right? Because we have clients whose parents were narcissists or some other toxic personality type, and they're not. They're the opposite. They took a different direction. But it can also break in terms of that trait being, passed on, so to speak.
Right. And in terms of sexual assault, sexual abuse is really common as a form of domestic violence. And when kids see or sense this is going on, this becomes their normal. So whether they want to take on the traits or not, is they're around it and they think this is normal. Just as this kind of unhealthy relationships, when they're around it, no matter how much you say to your kid, don't act like me and my, your other parent, that's what's familiar to them. That's what they're going to be drawn to.
Right, exactly. And when you stay in the relationship, you're modeling for them that this is fine, this is normal, this is okay, this is what because we're role models for our kids, whether we want to be or not. And one of the greatest gifts, my kids are 18 and 15 now, and they were 10 and 7 when my ex and I split. And you and I have been together for more than 7 years. So my younger son has known us as a couple longer than so he's known us as a couple longer than he's known his mother and I as a couple. And what we were modeling for him and my other son and your kids too is what a healthy relationship looks like, because we treat each other respectfully and all the other good stuff that comes with that.
Yeah. I want to keep noting what our pediatrician is saying, it's making me think. She said that there's often an ADHD misdiagnosis where there's trauma at home. And I'm thinking, Chris, how many people do we talk to that say that they themselves have ADHD? Their kids have been diagnosed with ADHD. I think a huge number of our clients have children with special needs, not even including ADHD, but that is really, really common in the domestic violence community. And she's also saying separation anxiety, kid is externalizing and focusing and not focusing, defiant, and the parents chalk it up to ADHD, but it's actually abuse. Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting to see once the person is out and the drama's over, how the kids can recover, because they can be okay. I mean, I can't think of a question we get more often than, my partner or my former partner is a narcissist or some other toxic personality type, and we're sharing custody. Are my kids going to be okay?
Yes.
Right.
Top question, other than how do I get out of the legal system fast? Those two are together.
Exactly.
Most popular.
What we found is that yes, the kids can be okay. And you got to do double duty. You have to be a particularly healthy parent, really, really work hard. But yes, they can be okay. Right.
Well, that's why it's so important for you yourself to take care of yourself and kind of get it together and get a lot of support, because they're looking for some kind of rock in the sea of instability, you know, and it is really, really hard. I mean, we already know how hard it is to get out of these relationships.
Yeah, and it kind of touches on something from an interview you did last week where you were talking about, you know, the other parent disparaging, right? When the other parent saying bad things about you and how you handle that. And the comment, who was that was that?
It was probably, was it last week? Was it Sarah?
I'm not sure. Well,
I don't know. Keep talking.
But, yeah. So, and the answer was that you just show them that you're a great parent, show them that you're really doing a good job, that you care about them, that you love them, and over time, they're gonna have like this disconnect between what they're being told and what they're observing, and what they're observing will carry more weight.
That was a guardian ad litem who gave us that advice. Who is we're going to interview, I think, in the beginning of September.
That's right. The pre-interview. It was the pre-interview. Yeah, I thought that was really important. It's almost like just stay the course, do the best you can do, and your kids have the best chance.
Right? I know. And this, of course, like this is very vague right now what we're saying because it's not our big topic, but it's a hard topic and it's not easy to just stay the course. We recognize that.
Right. So there's between 4.5, it's a wide range, so it's really an estimate. 4.5 and 15 million children in the U.S. are exposed to physical violence in the home. That's just physical. We know it's a lot more for the other types.
Right, because we know that before physical takes place, there's always emotional and psychological.
Yeah.
So usually verbal. So yeah, and that's what's reported.
And so the next bullet from our presentation was that the effects of verbal and emotional abuse, they can be far worse than physical abuse. The effects on the kids.
Because there's nothing to see. You can't go in and say, look, here's my bruises.
Right, it's happening or it's not happening. With physical, it's very clear, right? I hit you or I didn't hit you. But with emotional, it's like a lot of times narcissists are really good at giving like little things. They're subtle. They're insults that are disguised as jokes, for example. That's the thing they do all the time, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to, especially for a kid, you know, who's not mature enough to recognize like sarcasm that goes too far or that kind of thing.
Well, I think there's also a sort of cognitive dissonance where, like, let's say a parent says something, but the kid feels like something's off, you know, and I feel like that's something that I struggled with as an adult, where I would believe what the person said, but my body knew that it wasn't true. And it's just, and kids, we think our parents love us unconditionally. So how do we make sense of a parent that's behaving a certain way that doesn't feel right, but they're saying, but I love you, I love you.
Yeah. So 50 to 70% of men who frequently assault wives or their spouses also frequently abuse children.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one. We get a lot of our clients, the physical abuse is actually not as common. We get a lot of stuff with sexual abuse.
Right.
As well. And that is so tricky.
You know, and it also makes me think of a shortcoming of the legal system, right? I mean, looking at this statistic, an abuser is an abuser. I mean, if somebody's abusive, they're not going to be just abusive to one person. That one person might be their target right now. But if somebody's capable of being abusive, they could abuse anyone at any time, right? And the courts don't see that. So, you know, when there's a domestic violence case, for example, and then it becomes custody, a person who, even if they can prove domestic violence against them, it doesn't affect the custody case because the courts don't recognize that simple fact that an abuser is an abuser. If they're abusing the partner, they're likely to abuse the kids. So, you know, we don't spend a lot of time, you know, complaining about the system. We're more like, let's go win your case. But it is a true shortcoming, and hopefully over time that will change.
Right, especially with the states like Connecticut that have coercive control laws. So they are, especially when determining custody, that was the reason why this law was really pushed into place. Is you can't just look at physical abuse. You can't just look at imminent threat of physical harm towards the children. You have to look at the broader picture of what else has been going on with these kids, how else they're affected by non-physical abuse, but coercive control.
Yeah. And so hand in hand with that last one is, this is just jaw-dropping. Children are 1,500% more likely to be abused in homes where partner abuse occurs. Astonishing.
Yeah.
And I have one more for you that I always save for last because it's really scary. And you know, when there's abuse in the household, kids are 6 times more likely to commit suicide.
Yeah, and I know we have clients whose kids are very young and have expressed suicidal ideation. It's called, like, threatening suicide. We have clients whose young children have also been hospitalized because of suicidal ideation. But we also have a number of clients whose kids have gotten better and have survived and moved on to thrive because they have gotten a lot of help. And, you know, something I think we should note is that when you're dealing with a toxic co-parent or counter-parent, they often will try to block the child from getting therapy. And one of the people that we interviewed, I think it was Leslie Miller, who used to be a guardian ad litem and is now a narcissistic abuse therapist and then some. We've done some lives together, but I think it was her who said that the courts generally, most judges will push for kids to have therapy, especially during some kind of separation. So if one parent is blocking therapy, that makes that person look really bad, and that could affect legal decision making on medical, because it's like, why wouldn't you want your kid to get help? But we know a lot of those toxic personalities fear exposure. So if the kid is going to a therapist, they can't control what that kid said. So that's why they'll minimize and say, my kid is fine. And of course, we know they'll blame you, the targeted parent, like any problems the kid has, it's your fault, you caused it.
Right, or they'll sabotage the relationship with the therapist. They'll not pay, or they'll make harassing phone calls, or they'll complain that this therapist is a bad one, we need to switch. Anything to interfere and not get outed themselves.
Right, and I'm seeing another comment from our pediatrician. She's saying, let's see, as a safe parent has to reinforce the child's real feelings when the other parent is lying to them or cuts them down. That's true, and we've spent entire interviews talking about the need to validate your children's feelings, because the other parent, whether they're in the household or out of the household with visitation, is gaslighting them just like they did to us. That never happened. You're not seeing it right. You're just a kid. You don't see it. And often, like, oh, you're not going to understand any of this till you're older. You won't understand me and my perspective because you're too young. When you're older, this is very familiar to me, but when you're older, that's when you'll get it. It's all about them and their perspective.
Yeah, and it actually, like, the roles reverse almost. The parent acts like the child, and the kids are forced to be the parent in that relationship. And I'm thinking of several of our clients with that.
Yeah.
Where the kids kind of, you know, this should probably go on our list of the impacts, but the kids are forced to grow up faster.
Yes.
Which it cuts both ways, right? I mean, it's good because they get skills. Like your kids are so emotionally mature, I mean, just beyond belief. I mean, they're more mature than I was at 35, and they're in their early 20, 22 and 19. But it's sad in a way because some of the childhood innocence is lost. So they have to develop a fast track. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I finally got out, my first thing was I need to get therapy for these kids. And I was so scared because I really did think their lives were over. We had some issues with abandonment, and those first 2 years after the end of my marriage were really, really hard for the kids to sort of make sense of who their father really was. And that was between him and them. You know, that wasn't through the court system. Luckily, I was able to deal with the parenting plan and the custody stuff before, outside of court. So that was huge, but it was still very, very difficult. I mean, we have situations on the opposite extreme where there's the abandonment, the one toxic parent just leaves the kids, And then there's the opposite where they are meddling and in everybody's faces and lives all the time. So,
speaking of things that sound familiar,
right.
it has gotten better over the years. It's got a lot better.
Yeah. Oh, one thing before we continue, just because I want to make sure I say this during this talk, is I was just watching Bill Farias, who is a Massachusetts attorney who we've done interviews with before, and literally 4 minutes before we went on the air, I saw he had a thing, and it was talking about somebody who was saying, I can't live with my spouse anymore. I want to just get out of the house. Like, I don't know what to do with the kids. And so he said, so this is legal advice from what I saw on Instagram, Bill Farias in Massachusetts. He said, one of the most important things you need to do is to get a parenting plan in place before you just make some rash decision to either leave the house without the kids or leave the house with the kids. You need to know your rights. You need to know your rights legally, because that can really turn on you. So if you're still in the house and you are thinking of leaving, please speak to an attorney to learn whether you're male or female, know your legal rights before you make that rash decision. Again, that was why I myself took 2 years. Not that you should take 2 years to get out, but really it's important to have a safety plan. It's important to have an exit plan, because what you do before you get into the legal system matters also.
Right. And now I'm thinking of somebody we talked to just this week who was, I believe, in California, who couldn't take it anymore, left the house, and 5 years later, she hardly ever sees the kids because he just, sideswiped her legally, and she had left, and he got custody, and he doesn't even he travels all the time, and he doesn't even leave the kids with her. He leaves them with another relative. And it's a nightmare of a situation. Now, hopefully, she can dig out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my entire list.
That's your entire list? Okay, good. So I think, again, what you had said about emotional intelligence, like, even though there's all these terrible things that can affect the kids by staying in the relationship, we know how hard it is to leave. As a domestic violence advocate, you've probably heard this line before, it takes an average of 7 to 9 times. And that's not just walking out of the house, but like 7 to 9 real attempts to get out of a toxic relationship. So it's never easy. And a lot of people say, well, why didn't you just leave? Or why don't you just walk away? It's really, really hard when you have kids, because you are tied to that person basically forever. I mean, you've got at least 18 years in the legal system in most states and countries. And after that, we all know about post-separation abuse and how those kids are used as pawns. So even though staying in the relationship is dangerous to the kid, leaving the relationship is also dangerous to the kids, because then it's up to third parties. You have guardian ad litems and custody evaluators and minors counsel, and who knows who else starts the piranha-like feeding frenzy that get in your family business and make decisions. And how many calls do we get from people who are absolutely heartbroken over their custody arrangements that say, maybe I should have stayed in the relationship, because then I could have at least had more time with my kids. We have some clients whose exes work all the time and travel all the time. They've gotten divorced, and now that the ex is in their face more than before, and they're like, I should have just kept that person away. But it's never an easy decision.
Yeah. You made me think of something else, which we've talked a lot about lately, and that's how, the importance of validating what the kids are feeling, right? How that's you have to walk a fine line, because a lot of times when you're under the microscope of family court, when it's custody, whether you've got an active case or not, you don't want to disparage the other parent. You don't want to do that anyway, right? I mean, that's just bad for kids that talk badly because they love you both, even if the other person does have an issue. But so it's tricky, and you have to choose your words carefully, like to validate their feelings and what they've observed that's real. You want to help them overcome the gaslighting the other side is doing, but you got to walk a fine line in terms of saying something negative about the parent. Let them figure it out, right?
Yeah, very tricky. Yeah, really tricky. And I was thinking, I know I started my last sentence somewhere and ended up somewhere else, which always happens. But I was going to say, even though there are these terrible consequences on kids for staying in the relationship, as there are sometimes in leaving the relationship. Like you noted before, there are hidden benefits to people going through this experience. Not that we'd ever want it to happen to anybody. And one of them is that often your kids, and I'm speaking from personal experience, your kids learn to develop better boundaries because they have to do it with a parent. They have to do it at a younger age. And so I've seen in my own children the wisdom that took me a lot more decades to learn than they did, where even not just with their romantic relationships, with friendships, where they feel like, this doesn't feel right. Like, I don't have to tolerate this, or I can talk to someone about that. They recognize that someone who texts them all the time and expects an answer, that's not flattering. That's creepy. Right. That's not a good thing. Whereas their friends will be like, oh, the person's jealous. Like, I feel so good. They just want to be with me all the time. My daughter's like, no, that's not healthy. Yeah. So they do get a lot more mature sooner. It is heartbreaking to see it, but these are skills that they can carry with them throughout their lives. And that's why it is so important to get support for yourself, especially get support for your kids. Often if you are in the legal system, it's good to have that third party support, because your ex is going to try and blame everything on you. So it's good to have that third party buffer who the kids can talk to. Also, you can't control so many things. So when the kids come to you, and they certainly should be able to come to you and talk about things, but a lot of times you can't fix it for them. And they have to understand that. Like, you're doing the best you can in the confines of a system that's broken and often doesn't care about you or them, but you just try to do the best you can, and please stop beating yourself up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Chris, I'm done.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And we're going to reschedule with Dennis and see what he has to say about this topic. But thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week with a different guest. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.